The county attorney plays a key role in criminal justice in the county, and given the size of Hennepin County and its population, a key role in criminal justice leadership in the state of Minnesota. This office is critical all the time, but most importantly, this year. It's an office that is often in the media, mostly for its decisions and performance in its criminal prosecution work. But the Hennepin County Attorney's Office has a broad range of responsibilities involving juvenile justice, child support enforcement, school attendance, violence prevention services, gun violence prevention, prevailing wage and wage theft enforcement, and protection of vulnerable adults, including seniors, and more. Frankly, after reading through that list and thinking about it, I don't know why anyone would want this job. And yet, here we have 5 people who are willing to tough it out as to which one of them gets it. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for putting yourselves forward, running for this office, and engaging our community. Well deserved. As I assume everyone knows, the incumbent is not running for re-election, so this is an open seat. Kind of levels the playing field, levels the path forward. Before we get into the nuts and bolts, before we get into the substance of the evening, I do have to make a donation request. Just as this event wouldn't happen without the many volunteers who are here making it happen, it also wouldn't happen without some money to help make everything possible. If you're here in the auditorium, there will be some donation cans moving around. If you can take a minute, pull out the wallet and make something happen, that would be great. If you're online or in the auditorium and prefer to give donations securely online, go to mplsdflseniors.org and you can donate there. Again, that's mplsdflseniors.org. And now, without further ado, the main event. Next up is one of our moderators for the evening, Kara Latofsky, Political Director of the Minneapolis Area DFL Chapter. Kara?
Thank you. As Jim said, I'm Kara Latofsky, the Political Director for the Minneapolis Area DFL Senior Caucus. And I'm going to be asking the questions with my partner on the other side of the stage here from the West Metro Chapter, Diane Solinger. So let's give Diane a round of applause as well. And I also want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and the ones on Zoom, and the volunteers who helped make this happen, and the event planning team and the candidates for showing up. But before, I don't know, I like to do this goofy thing, but before we get into it, I want to kind of take a minute and understand who is in the room. So if you could clap loudly when I say a thing that applies to you, that'd be great. So who in the house is a member of the DFL Senior Caucus? Nice, nice. Who in the house attended a No Kings rally this past Saturday? Louder, good, excellent. And then who in the house has a senior in their lives that they care about? Oh, at least a couple of the candidates up here applauded for that one. So thanks for that. Thanks for that. And also I wanted to get everybody to get your willies out, because it would be great if people could hold their applause for what the candidates say until the very end, where we'll give everybody a big round at the end of the forum. So here's the format for tonight's forum. Every candidate will get 2 minutes for an opening statement. And then we're going to get into questions. Diane and I have identified 8 questions, and each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer each question. Diane and I are going to take turns asking them. And, you know, we don't have time to ask every question that people have. I appreciate in the RSVP forum, we did collect ideas, and there's a lot of them. So I would love to find a way to share those with the candidates so they know what is on people's minds. And to make this happen, we have a timekeeper. So Tim Rice, right here, shake your hand. All the candidates have to recognize Tim Rice. He's got some tools there to make sure that you stay under your 2-minute or 90 seconds. And then you might have heard the bell, because there is a bell when you're out of time. So Tim Rice seems to be working with Tim Bonham. I think Tim Bonham might be the bell guy. So that will really help. Another thing that will really help is that the mumbling in the audience might get onto the Zoom. And so if we could hold that to a minimum, that would be great. And the candidates need to amplify their voices so that it can get onto Zoom. Is that got a thumbs up from Holly?
I got
that
it
is the
fixed
way.
here, so I got it fixed here, so you don't have to worry about that.
Oh,
We fixed the audio. So
boy,
sorry
the
about
voice
that.
of God.
All right.
Thank you.
The voice from the back room.
Oh, I see you back there. Thank you. And so with that, let's get going. So up on the stage here in alphabetical order, we have Anders Spoke, Cedric Frazier, Hao Win, Matt Pelican, and Francis Shen. And I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves as part of your opening statement. And so with that, we are going to start with Anders because he comes first in the alphabet.
All right, thank you very much. Is this working good? Okay. Well, thank you for having me tonight, and thank you to the DFL Senior Caucus for hosting this event. This is a really important event, and it's a really important office, so thank you. My name is Anders Folk. I'm a lifelong Minnesotan. I'm a father of 4. I live here in Minneapolis with my wife and my 4 kiddos, which includes a set of triplets. I'm a lifelong Minnesotan who grew up in Hopkins. I graduated Hopkins High School, went to the University of Minnesota, went again to the University of Minnesota for law school. And it was in law school that I started my, here we go. It was in law school that I started my public service career, my criminal justice career. I worked at the county attorney's office in the juvenile division under Amy Klobuchar's leadership. And it was also in law school, I joined the Marine Corps. Public service and serving my country was really important to me. And I started that in law school. It was also my first job out of law school. I was a judge advocate in the Marine Corps, prosecuting and defending Marines and sailors under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I then got to come home and work as a federal prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office, prosecuting, investigating any number of cases, whether it's fraud, national security, drug trafficking, you name it, I probably investigated it. And I was lucky enough to come back to the U.S. Attorney's Office in a leadership role, ultimately serving as the acting U.S. Attorney, running the U.S. Attorney's Office. And in that role, I'm proud to have signed the indictment charging Derek Chauvin violating George Floyd's civil rights. That's the experience I bring to this race. And in my experience, the best federal prosecutors and the best state prosecutors are those who really can find the right balance between compassion for those of us who are caught up in the criminal justice system and ensuring consequences from those who put our public safety at risk. As your county attorney, I'll be focused on strategic enforcement to ensure we're focusing on folks who are putting public safety at risk, prevention and intervention to do everything we can to keep people out of the criminal justice system, and to elevate the role of the county attorney as a leader in our community. In the wake of Operation Metro Surge, I'm committed to accountability for any federal agents who violated Minnesota law. Thanks again for having us here tonight.
Hey everybody, Representative Cedric Frazier here, father, husband, son, grandson. Thank you to the Senior Caucus for organizing and getting everyone out tonight. Thanks to everyone who has come out tonight. You know, I'm not a senior yet, but God willing, I'm gonna be there. And when I do get there, I know my grandkids are gonna ask in this moment, Papa, what did you do? What did you do to protect your neighbors? What did you do to stand up for people that didn't have the ability to stand up for themselves? And what I can honestly say is, it'll all be archived because everything's on social media. But I'll be able to have that conversation with them. It's the same thing that I thought about when I was learning about the civil rights movement growing up, wondering what would I have done in those moments? And I very clearly can tell you what the answer was be. I stood up. We have all stood up, and we've answered the call for our neighbors in this moment. And honestly, I want to say thank you to my folks that are sitting at this table. Matt Pelican, thank you for your courage for quitting your job when your boss decided to represent the person that shot Renee Good. Professor Shin, thank you for what you're doing for your students by teaching them a different way of being innovative and thinking about the law. And Hal, thank you for what you're doing under John Choi's leadership over in Ramsey County. And thank you, Anders, for what you're doing for being in this race. These things are important. And we are at a moment in our history when the question is, which side are you on? And I can honestly say that I know everyone in this room that is standing up, you all are on the right side of history, and you all have done the things, and you're continuing to do the things that's most important for Minnesotans. So I'm bringing over 20 years of experience as an attorney in all different areas of the law. I'm bringing 10 years as a labor attorney, started my career as a public defender. I've been there at the toughest moments for people, ensuring that their constitutional rights were protected. I will continue to bring that with me. 6 years as a state representative, and the multitude of relationships that I have built and the social and political capital that I've built, I'm bringing that with me to this office, and I will lead every single day with those resources.
Hi, folks. My name is Hal Wen, and I'm humbly asking for your support for the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. I'm going to echo what Cedric said, which is I thank everyone for being on this panel and for showing up to keep our democracy going. I sit before you, an immigrant and a refugee. At the age of 7, my single mom brought us 3 boys over the South China Sea to the refugee camps of the Philippine Islands. We got to come to America, and I believe that every family deserves the same opportunities that my family got. That's why I give back every single day. The voice that you hear is a voice given to me by an ESL teacher. I am a child of public assistance. For the last 15 years, I have been a prosecuting attorney, handling cases from homicide to forgery to fraud, auto theft, sexual assault, everything in between. And I'm going to be a little quiet because I have a 5th grader out there who has little ears, who's also mad that dad has to be here and not at a park. But for me, 15 years of prosecution has taught me a lot, taught me about service. Before that, I was a law enforcement officer wearing the badge and the shield, protecting our communities. And I currently lead one of the largest prosecution offices and units at the county level in the state. As a prior law enforcement officer, there's nothing more sacred to me and a current prosecutor than holding people accountable who wear the badge and the shield when they run afoul of our public trust. And ICE is no exception to that. No one is above the law and no one is beneath the law. I've stood shoulder to shoulder with Governor Walz when he made sure that Minnesota was a trans refuge state, making sure that gender affirming healthcare was healthcare for everyone. That's important to me and my family because that's my family. I stood with Attorney General Keith Ellison when we sued President Trump because he was coming from Minnesota school and money, telling us to turn our backs on LGBTQ communities. I am not afraid of bullies. Right now, more than ever, the county attorney's office needs an experienced leader, one who has the values and integrity of this community every single day. And I'm asking for your help to do that because I believe I am that candidate. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Matt Pelican. Thank you so much for being here, as others have said. I'm a lifelong Minnesotan. I grew up in Northfield with Paul Wellstone as my hometown hero. I went to St. Olaf College and the University of Minnesota Law School, where I was editor-in-chief of the Law Review. I worked for Paul on his Senate campaign. I worked for Mark Dayton, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton around the country. I came back here. I've been a litigator for 14 years after clerking for the Minnesota Supreme Court. One of the things people are surprised when you become a lawyer and they hear from you and they say, isn't it really easy when you go up against a bad lawyer? And it turns out, no, it's actually much better when you litigate cases against good lawyers. And I say that because it's good to be a candidate running with people who are so qualified as the 4 men sitting to my left. This is a great field of qualified people who bring a lot of experience and goodwill to this office, and that makes it better for our community to have good people running. So I want to thank everyone on this stage too for putting their names in. But this is not an ordinary time. I got in this race. I have a great stump speech about it. I'll talk about some of the reasons I'm running tonight, but Operation Metro Surge changed things in this community. It changed things in this country. It's a time for ordinary Minnesotans. How many people in this room drove meals for families that couldn't leave the house to feed themselves? How many people in this room drove kids to school because their parents were too scared to leave the house? How many people in this room have whistles on you or have stood on those street corners blowing whistles to warn neighbors about the secret police that were storming our communities? Thank you for what you're doing. This is a moment for you. It's a moment for ordinary Minnesotans, and I mean that in the best sense possible. So as you sit here tonight and you hear from the great people and the different experience, I want you to ask yourself, what is the experience to meet this moment? What is the experience to drive accountability and justice in our community, not generally, but today, in this moment, for an elected official, a county attorney worthy of the bravery that you have shown and your neighbors have shown in this moment? Thank you.
Great to be with you tonight. My name is Francis Shen. I'm a professor of law and a member of the graduate program in neuroscience at the University of Minnesota. And just by saying that, you already know I'm a different type of candidate. But I'm running because I think we need a different type of system. I live over in Minneapolis, my wife and 2 kids, and I also think about what am I going to tell my kids? And one thing I'm going to say is, we're 25 years into the 21st century, and this criminal justice system, to me, still looks the same as it did before Trump and for all of my adult life. So we can blame the federal government for a lot of things, but I don't think we can blame them for the systemic failures, the continued systemic failures that our justice system has. So here's what I want to do. 3 things. Catch the bad guys, which we don't do a good job of. I'll tell you why. Ask why did you do the things you did, and then figure out what we can do in the justice system to make sure it doesn't happen again. It's a simple equation, yet we're failing on all 3. 1, do we catch the bad guys? No. The clearance rates, that's the fancy term for did you catch the bad guys in Minneapolis, are horrendous. 67% for homicide, 20 to 20% for rape and robbery, 1% for car theft. And just tonight, when my student interns walked in, how you doing? Not so good. Why? My car was broken into today. She joins one of my other students who's had her car broken into 3 times. This is lawlessness. What do we need to do? Work with law enforcement, focus deterrence. We have a plan, we can do it. Second, when you do catch folks, instead of treating them as just another cog in a criminal conveyor belt of injustice, ask why. Individualized justice. There's a plan, we can do it. Third thing is then, how do you implement that? We need to empower victims. We need to work with the community to figure out how we can do it. There are proven effective strategies. I hope we get to talk about some of those tonight. My view is that better decisions in line with science can produce better outcomes in line with justice. This is a new moment, but maybe in a different way than we're talking about. This will be the first county attorney in the history of Hennepin County attorneys that has to seriously manage the use of AI and new technology in that office. I taught our state's first law and AI class over 10 years ago. I work at the cutting edge. At 2026, I think it's time for an innovative new type of county attorney, and I'm excited to talk about it tonight. Thank you.
All right, we're going to get going with our questions here. And so our order now will start with whoever was second, which I think was Cedric, and then follow the same order, right? All right, let's do that. That's easier. We're going to hand the microphone down the line. So here is our first question. Yes, here is our first question. Regarding the safety of seniors, as Hennepin County Attorney, what would your role be in assisting seniors with problems such as fraud, scams, and elder abuse?
Thank you for the question. One of the things would be making sure I get out to where seniors are. Getting out to senior living facilities, getting out to your places of worship. If you're still working jobs, getting out there, organizing things maybe in a break room. If you're a greeter at a place during your retirement, making sure we get to those spaces where you are to have conversations. Because I want to hear directly from you around what you've got concerns about, around what type of things may be being presented to you that are particular scams. And education is a big part of that. Making sure we educate you on what, scammers are getting pretty sophisticated. They're making things look really good and really authentic. And I understand that. So we want to make sure that we're educating our elder folks to look out for particular fraud, making sure that you can, and making sure we can prevent that as much as possible, and taking that information with us when we want to prevent as much as possible. When the crime does happen, we want to make sure, Professor Shen just talked about clearance rate, we want to make sure we solve those crimes, because the best deterrent is knowing that individuals are going to be caught when they do a crime and held accountable. And that is the way we're going to make sure we engage, educate, prevent as much as possible, prosecute, hold accountable when we have to. Repeat my name. Oh, I am Cedric Frazier.
My name is Hao Wen. So I wish my mom was in the audience. She's 80 years old. That's who I clapped for. She's my senior. She loves to pick up the phone. If anybody calls, she picks up the phone. That's our generation. And a few years ago, the social security number went with the phone because someone called and asked for it. And then a checking account happened, and then we had to do all of that. It was really tough. I think right now more than ever, we need to understand, and part of my experience, because I've been a prosecutor 15 years, is sometimes, and I'm going to say the hard thing, is sometimes the elder abuse or the fraud comes from within the family. And so a nursing home becomes a place where somebody comes and visits, but now there's something signed and then a deed of land and things like that. What we need to do is we need to work with law enforcement because behind that is a warrant that law enforcement needs to get into the bank account. Behind that is a warrant that we need to get into the text messages of the person that shows up every single day to befriend the senior. So one of the things we do is we need to teach and treat law enforcement and empower them to investigate these crimes, right? And then once we investigate these crimes, we need to prosecute because our seniors are our treasures. They've raised us, they have uplifted us, they've taken care of us generations to come. And once we prosecute them, we do need to hold them accountable. And education certainly is a part of that, but also the execution of an actual prosecution with investigation. And in my office, as director of the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, we have an elder abuse unit, and I'm proud of our work.
Thank you. Anders Folk. So I'm going to tell you a real quick story about a woman named Bonnie Hulsema. I represented Bonnie as part of my pro bono or free legal work I provide to folks who are charged in federal court. Bonnie was charged as part of a fraud scheme. She was in her late 70s for acting as a money mule on behalf of fraudsters based in Africa. And she moved over $1 million, around $3 million, using Bitcoin to these fraudsters in Africa. When this fraud scheme started, she thought she was in love with a general who was going to change her life, who just needed a little bit of money to get back from Iraq. This fraud scheme started with Bonnie as the victim, and it ended with Bonnie in federal court. And it is absolutely heartbreaking. And it indicates, I think, a couple things. One, there are just these people out there who will prey on anybody, and hope is an easy thing to prey upon. Loneliness is an easy thing to prey upon. And those are things that often we find in our senior community. And so I'll echo the comments from Cedric and how education is a critically important part of protecting our seniors. But that education isn't just to the seniors, it's to their family members, because it is oftentimes the family members who have to step in and do the hard things. And the prosecutors have an obligation to sit down with family members across the community in a way that speaks to all of our diverse communities and make sure they understand the threat to the seniors. And so I think that education component has to lead, and the prosecution will follow.
Yeah, great question and great responses. I'll emphasize a lot and just add a couple of things. Elder justice and responding to elder abuse is something that we've really focused on from the start of our campaign. You can go to the website. It's shenforsafety.org. And in particular, I'm a fan of something called the RISE Collaborative. It's an evidence-based model that focuses on repairing the harm, inspiring change in the individual who did that thing, because especially when it's a family member, they're not going away, and the older adult who's been harmed doesn't want them to go away. So you have to make change. This isn't going to change on its own. Supporting connection, the dealing with the loneliness epidemic is a major issue. And by the way, we've got great resources in this state and in our community at the U Center for Healthy Aging and Innovation, which we work with, can help to address that. And finally, empowering choice. The tension with aging, and we work in this in our work, is getting that balance between not being too overprotective, but at the same time recognizing that there's possibility for defraud. And so we're a big fan of supported decision-making, and that's a way to empower choice for all ages of adults, but finding ways to support decision-making when it's needed. The last thing I'll say is that, to me, a lot of this, and has come up already, is dealing with our social connectedness. This is a public health issue. This is another place where the criminal justice system can't be seen in isolation from all of the other parts of our society. Too often we think it's just criminal justice, but no, when you ask why, you begin to peel back the layers. That's why I love this interdisciplinary approach. But great comments.
I'm a progressive Democrat because I believe that politics and government should be tools to protect the vulnerable and hold the powerful accountable. I became a lawyer for the same reason, to protect the vulnerable and stand up for those who can't protect themselves. I'm not running to be a prosecutor because I take any joy in the idea of putting someone in prison. I'm running to continue that lifelong work of using the law to protect the vulnerable and protect people who cannot protect themselves. It's not academic for me. My mom and dad are in the audience. They live downtown. My husband, who's also here, and I moved our parents downtown. I walk to work. I want Minneapolis to be a safe, thriving, livable city for everyone. I care a lot about the people on the margins of our society. I also care about every single person in this room and this city and this county who are trying to make it a good place to live and get by. As county attorney, I would continue the work of Amy Klobuchar and create a task force dedicated specifically to protecting our elderly citizens. They are unfortunately among the most vulnerable because of a host of targets of fraud, abuse, neglect. I'll ask another question. How many people in this room are tired of all the spam phone calls? That's a numbers game. It won't take very many to shut that down. We have to get to the bottom of this, and I want my mom and dad and my grandma and all of you to be able to answer the phone without worrying that you're going to be taken in by a scam. So absolutely, it is my life's work, and standing up for those people who need us on their side is why I'm running for office.
So regarding the need to address social justice and racial disparities, as Hennepin County Attorney, what will you do to help close the racial disparities in the criminal justice system? In 90 seconds.
It's really important. I'm running on a platform of safety and justice because we have to have safe communities, but we have to have justice. I worry that sometimes we have gone to bend over backwards to make excuses for people who need to face some accountability, and that what we're seeing in our communities is going to be used as an excuse to go back to failed systems that destroyed trust in law enforcement, that brought us the lack of trust that we saw pour into the streets after the murder of George Floyd. But I think we have to be really cognizant of mission creep. One of the fundamental tenets of our society is that everyone's equal before the law. When someone commits a crime and that comes to my desk, my job is to enforce the law as written. I think the county attorney has a lot of power to go what I call upstream and downstream from that charging decision. Go upstream, get into the schools, continue the great work of Keith Ellison and our mayor and engaging faith leaders and community leaders to get to youth before they commit a crime. Go downstream, work with our Department of Corrections, get into the prison system to make sure that it's actually rehabilitating people and not just a pipeline. Those are all really important things to do, and it is essential that we have a county attorney that is going to keep justice front of mind, but part of justice is that everyone's equal before the law, and I will uphold the law equally for every crime that's committed here.
Great question. So 3 things in response. One, and this has been a lot of the work that we've done in our lab over the years, is thinking really crucially and recognizing that systemic racism is a real thing and real evidence. The program I ran last night was about how systemic racism ends up changing the brain. And there's evidence now to show that it's really crucial that that's front and center because it's been marginalized so much. Secondly, as a very practical matter, this county is largest in the state, sees 10 to 15,000 cases a year. And we are mistaken if we think we can just say, oh, that's where the bias is creeping in. Oh, that's where it is. I'm actually set up to work with the team that if we win, we'll be able to analyze the last 10 years of cases, over 100,000, to see exactly where those biases are creeping in. And then we can identify how to respond. Without that information, I think it's really difficult. And third, I want to echo what Matt just said. We need better probation and parole and reentry programs. We've got a lot of ideas. I don't have time to mention them all tonight. That will help to reduce some of the disparities you mentioned, because too often those programs are not hitting home well enough, and we're not dealing with the substantive underlying issues that might be leading to the offenses. That's why I keep mentioning at the beginning. Once you ask that question, why, and better understand the factors that led to the behavior that you want to change, you've got a much better chance of changing that behavior. And you can do it without incarceration much of the time.
Thank you, Anders Folk. I think the first step is admitting we have a problem and admitting that disparities exist. So that's step one. And then from there, I think it's all about how do we address them. One thing in my experience is offices like a county attorney's office have to have a diverse set of decision makers to help represent the community, ensure that you are taking into account all of the various viewpoints and all the various lived experiences of the community that you're in charge of keeping safe. And so one thing the office needs to do is lead by example and have diversity woven through the culture of the office and its leadership. Another thing that I think is critical is that the office is a leader in the use of programs like diversion, programs like restorative justice, helping the community understand what their options are for expunging old convictions and doing the work to help mitigate the impact of being involved in the criminal justice system. The county attorney's office can play a leadership role there in a lot of different ways. And I think it's a key component of making sure the office is a leader in the criminal justice system, but in also making sure it's a leader in helping ensure that the people who are involved in the criminal justice system are able to get back home to their families, get back on their feet, and become contributing members of our community more quickly. And then I think the last piece that I think is really critical is ensuring that every community in Hennepin County is getting the same level of attention and the same care from the county attorney's office as every other. No community should get less than any other community in Hennepin County from our office.
Let me just tell you what we have done in Ramsey County since I've been there for nearly 11 years. One of the things we did with the leadership of County Attorney John Choi as his criminal chief is I authored and helped roll out the non-public safety traffic stop policy. And that policy initially really scared law enforcement. What do you mean we can't stop people for windshields anymore and cracked windshields or something hanging from the mirror? What do you mean about a brake light that you can't? What we found out was that the St. Paul Police Department and law enforcement were pulling over African-American folks, Black and brown folks, 4 times the rate more than white folks. And what we found out was also they were being searched on the side of the road 10 times more. And what we found is that they didn't discover any more drugs or guns on our Black and brown folks. But what it did do, it was eroded the trust of the community. What it did do was embarrass people and took their dignity away. And also it took away the trust of law enforcement. So I went to work with the leadership of County Attorney John Choi to write a policy that made sense. I went out there and I worked and had many conversations and bridge building with law enforcement. And we have a robust policy now. And I'm happy to report that those stops have gone down, the searches have gone down. We've also, under my leadership, I've hired a very diverse staff in our office. I promote, and I believe diversity is more than just skin color. And I have 10 seconds left, so I want to really also talk about the engagement of families in non-fatal public shootings. So we treat those non-fatals as if they were murderers, making sure that today's victim is not tomorrow's perpetrator and the reverse. Thank you.
Cedric Frazier, just quick point, a couple of things that Hal mentioned, the non-fatal shootings, the traffic stop. These are things that I've worked on as a legislator at the state level. And the reason I think it's important to mention that is because we want to make sure that we are applying these things evenly across our state in every jurisdiction. Because when we don't, we tend to see, when we look at the data, we see that there is huge disparities depending on where you are. Minneapolis has been mentioned, but these things are all over our state when you have the conversations. When you have the conversations with local law enforcement, they'll tell you those things as well. So I will continue to have those conversations with legislators because I have those relationships. It is a big part of the work that I've been doing in the time that I've been a legislator. We talk about the idea of mission creep. I don't see it as mission creep because it is the work that I have done. I understand the main focus of the prosecution office is to prosecute violent crimes. But when you do work proactively and you go upstream to do the prevention piece, that has a huge impact on the back end. What I often tell people is we have to work really hard on the upstream part because when we get people tethered to this system for 20 or 30 years, we all pay for that on the back end. And it's a huge price that we pay as a society. And there's ways we can absolutely prevent that. And just quickly to end up, it is very appropriate that we're having this conversation mere blocks away from where George Floyd was murdered. And what I remember is there was a press conference with, at the then time, the U.S. Attorney and Mike Freeman, and there was a comment made that said we might not be able to criminally charge that officer. And it was that led to the violence in the streets. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen again.
All right, thank you, everyone. Our third question. How will your office foster and manage the relationships with public safety partners, including the sheriff, the state attorney general's office, and police departments of cities within the county?
Cedric Frazier, I'll keep saying it, I think. Continue to do what I'm doing. I've been the vice chair of the Public Safety Committee at within the state legislature. I've been the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee. I've built up great relationships over the 6 years that I've been there. I've been a city council member for my city, City of New Hope, in the suburbs. Relationships there with our current chief, our current line officers. We'll continue to have those conversations. We'll continue to lean into those relationships, maintain those relationships, and build even more relationships with the jurisdictions around the county. Those relationships are vitally important. And the way you build them is you have constant communication, so you have constant check-ins. They'll have my cell number, I'll have their cell numbers. We can communicate frequently. I think those things are very important. It is the lack of having those relationships to where things break down. This is the important part again. When George Floyd was murdered, it was a lack of relationships with local law enforcement that led to some of the slowdown in the investigation that ultimately led to Attorney General Keith Ellison having to step in to bring some calm and bring the relationships that he had and the trust that he had to move that case forward. I have that trust now. I have those relationships now. I will continue to build on those. I will continue to communicate. And look, we don't have to agree on everything. But what we can agree on is that we are partners in this and we can't do this work alone. And our community safety plan must include all of the stakeholders. And I will make sure that every voice is in the room, because when you have every voice in the room, particularly the voices need to be there, we have better outcomes.
As we sit here right now, every police chief in Ramsey County has my cell phone number. And if they call, I pick up. We don't always agree, but I'm picking up that phone because there should be no surprises. I've built those relationships from the ground up because they're important for victims on the other side. That we have a functioning, bridge-building relationship between law enforcement and the prosecution. I have stood with Attorney General Keith Ellison when he said, hey, can you help me sue Trump? Because he's coming for Title IX money for Minnesota schools. He wants us to betray LGBTQ and trans folks. I stood there, I called the president out, I put my name out there, and I'm a refugee and an immigrant, and it is the scariest thing to do, but if this voice was given to me and I don't use it, who else will? I have stood the test of time on that. I'm proud of that. With regard to the governor, when we talk about making sure that Minnesota fights hate, our family has been with him time and time again, shoulder to shoulder, making sure that that works. I am a bridge builder. I am endorsed by the sheriff of our of Hennepin County, DeWanna Witt. She and I have a good relationship. But I told her when we entered this endorsement process that we'll have hard conversations and we won't always agree, but I'm very, very proud to have her trust. I drove all the way out to Medina, Long Lake, everything else, just last week. I'm a bridge builder by heart. I have also the endorsement of the Eden Prairie mayor, the Maple Grove mayor, the Edina mayor, and several others. I've done the work to make sure that our voice, all of our communities' voices are heard.
Thank you, Anders Folk. You know, the relationship between law enforcement and a prosecution office is unique because first, the prosecution office is responsible for taking cases from law enforcement, making a charging decision. And so there's a partnership element to it. But it is often the case that county attorneys' offices are also responsible for accountability with our law enforcement partners. And so that mix of accountability and partnership is at times difficult, and is at times one that has a little bit of back and forth to it, and you're not always seeing things the same way. And I can tell you, as somebody who has been involved in holding law enforcement officers accountable, you can't build the relationships in a crisis. And I agree with Cedric on that. That is something that has to predate when things get difficult. And to build a relationship with law enforcement is like to build a relationship with any other organization. There has to be mutual trust. There has to be constant communication, and there has to be clear expectations set. And you as a prosecutor and you as a leader in an office of prosecutors, of course, to the entire law enforcement community. And I think as a leader in a county attorney's office, you owe that same level of transparency and over communication and outreach to every stakeholder in the public safety community. And that unique relationship with law enforcement requires constant care and feeding by a county attorney's office. And I think there's no better example to see what a good relationship with your law enforcement partners can lead to than looking at how Ramsey County Attorney John Choi works with his law enforcement partners versus what we've seen in Hennepin County for the last 4 years. Relationships matter. And I spent my entire career building and executing great relationships.
Thanks. I agree with a lot of what's been said. You've heard the word relationships and trust building. Those are key, and I agree with Anders and et cetera. It needs to start early. I'll mention a couple of additional things and layers about what that trust looks like. One is understanding that so many of our police departments are overburdened for a lot of different reasons. And one of them, I'm going to keep coming back to this, is we are asking law enforcement, local law enforcement, to do more and more with less and less. How do you fix that? It's not going to be additional new resources. I wish it were, but it weren't. So you've got to be more smart and you've got to be more efficient. One of the ways that you can do that in partnership and it builds that trust are called joint response or behavioral response. And the idea is that not every time that 911 and police are called, it needs to be law enforcement. Now, often it does. And the key is to figure out when do you need law enforcement and when could a behavioral or joint response show up to relieve the burden on law enforcement and also to provide a better response, which may require something more along the lines of social and behavioral response. That's a way that we could innovate. The other thing I'll say is that this next county attorney has a lot of hard work to do. I don't know what others on this table have seen, but when I've been talking with local police chiefs, the relationships have really soured with our current county attorney's office for reasons that I don't want to speculate on, but that's the reality. And that bridge has been broken. It's got to be rebuilt. I would certainly commit to doing that. It's got to be public, and there's got to be a public trust established. And last thing I'll just say is that it's not just law enforcement and the county attorney's office, it's also the community. That's the triangle that needs to be strong.
I used a phrase in a previous question, Matt Pelican, by the way, I think that's the first time I've said my name since we started. I used a phrase, it's not academic. We live downtown, my family lives downtown. Last summer, a 14-year-old was shot and killed in front of the Federal Reserve. We heard it happen. We saw his body on the ground. We watched the first responders arrive. We saw his friends screaming from my parents' living room window. When the cops arrived, I was glad. There was no ambiguity in that moment. And I think that was one of the times I decided I wanted to run for county attorney. I had to run because we need to support the men and women in law enforcement and the first responders in this community. There's a poll that over 90% of the police officers in Hennepin County think that they will be criminally prosecuted for doing their jobs. That's unacceptable, and that leaves all of us less safe. Social media and our current political environment is very good at pulling us apart and throwing up all these roadblocks, but I think we need a little more common sense, and I think this issue is actually very simple. We need to support the men and women of law enforcement when all they're trying to do is keep us safe, and when they break the law, they need to be held accountable just like everyone else. It's very simple, actually, and we overcomplicate it all the time. I'm going to quote myself from a previous answer again one more time. Everyone's equal before the law. We support them, we praise them, but when you break the law, there are consequences.
All right, thank you. We are just a couple blocks from where George Floyd was murdered by Minneapolis police in a city and a county that has been calling for police reform. So the next question is about police reform. As Hennepin County Attorney, how will you work with law enforcement to support the needed police reforms to assure that policing is constitutionally sound and promotes the safety of all communities? And I do kind of want to shake up the order so Matt and Cedric don't always have to go first or last. So could we have Francis start this one and then send it that way? Oh no, send it to Matt next and then we'll spin it around.
Okay. Great. Francis Shen, S-H-E-N, University of Minnesota. It's a great question. It's a question that I've thought a lot about and a reason for coming in. So I may be an outlier here, I'm not sure, and I'll state at the outset, I've publicly said, it was a Star Tribune op-ed, that when it comes to police reform, I don't think consent decrees are the way to go. I think the evidence is pretty clear, and I'm a person who follows the evidence, that consent decrees don't produce the safety outcomes that we want. And to me, the bottom line of police reform is safer communities. And that's what we would do. So I would not focus on the consent decrees. And the reason is that the consent decrees are an administrative procedure. It puts it into the courts, where suddenly a judge removed from the community, and I want to get to that, where I think the community has got to take the lead, and community policing is the answer. It removes that community-centric focus. So no consent decree is not the way that I would go. Instead, what I would focus on are two things. One, evidence. Is there evidence that the policing practices are producing safer communities? And when they're not, and Hal's already mentioned an example, then we go a different direction, or we go where the evidence is. And two, community-based. One of the things I've heard continually from communities, including communities near here, is that there's an openness to policing if it's done right, but not when it's done wrong. So that's the answer. We go to communities, we build our strong relationships, as already mentioned, with police, and we keep a laser focus on safety outcomes.
Matt Pelican. A lot of it has been touched on by people on the stage. It starts with relationships and trust. You have to make sure that you are treating the law enforcement partners, who are really partners in the process with you, as respected allies, and make sure that they are on board with the agenda where you want to take things. I think there is a lesson here in the two counties. This traffic stop policy that's been mentioned. Ramsey County rolls it out, and a year later, the sheriff and the police chief are on stage, with John Choi, saying that they have been able to redeploy resources. Our county attorney rolls out virtually the identical policy, but doesn't tell law enforcement before it's publicly announced, causing chaos, consternation, second guessing, a disaster. You don't have to have an opinion one way or the other on that policy to see that blindsiding law enforcement with the own policy that you're rolling out is no way to run things and no way to bring the stakeholders to the table and move the ship together. Safety and justice, the two platforms of my campaign, are there because they go hand in hand, and you need to keep those law enforcement partners at the table, because this is a big ship that takes a lot of coordination, a lot of trust, a lot of mutual respect to steer it. Absolutely, we have to keep going in the right direction. Another reason I'm running is I'm worried that the experience of the last 4 years are going to be an excuse to go too far in the other direction, and we have to keep going forward. We cannot go back in reforming the justice system.
I don't want to. Anders Folk. Look, I think police reform is something that needs to just be woven into the culture of our public safety system. We should always be working to make all of our public safety stakeholders do better. County attorney's offices, police. When I was the acting U.S. attorney, we kicked off the pattern of practice investigation into the Minneapolis Police Department. And I had the opportunity to work with the state of Minnesota as they ultimately entered into their consent decree. And I'll tell you that I think consent decrees are a really important tool, and Professor Shen's right that it puts the process in front of a federal judge. But my experience is oftentimes law enforcement can sometimes kind of lose the energy to maintain some of these reforms that are so critical to building trust in the community. And one of the things a third party, a judge, does is provide a check on that loss of energy. I completely agree with the idea that I heard from Professor Shen about the need for community support and buy-in. And that is something that just needs to be part of the day-to-day work of your county attorney, the day-to-day work of your law enforcement community, and all of our community partners. Relationships matter, collaboration matters, and it has to start from the ground up, and it has to just be a constant part of the practice between law enforcement and the communities that they are responsible for protecting. And so there's no one thing that is going to create the right relationship between law enforcement and community, but it's going to be a lot of little things. Part of that falls on the community, but a lot of it falls on your prosecutors to ensure police are working to do their jobs every day.
Hi, everyone. Howen, I'm so glad we're talking about the Ramsey County policy. I can't begin to tell you how many drafts I wrote for that policy that we have today. I can't begin to tell you how many trips I got in my car and drove out to every police chief and had those very difficult conversations. How you don't understand what we're doing, what about this, what about that? But I could say I do, because I was a police officer and you know that. I understand what it's like to do your job, but here's what's happening with our community. I'm so proud that after years-long work, Roseville Police Department put into their training manual our non-public safety traffic stop policy, into their training manual. Now that is actual reform and work. I'm also proud because I put in work for the Minnesota Critical Incident Training team. I stand with Sheriff Witt on that. It trains officers on how to engage folks who are experiencing mental health crisis. So officers don't end up killing people who are experiencing crisis. In crisis, people don't end up getting hurt. I am doing the work and I'm so proud of that work. So for us, with regard to better training for officers, it's doing the work, going out to their roll calls, explaining what a traffic stop is, explaining what's constitutional, explaining interrogation techniques, explaining what the rule of law is, and training them on that. So those three things I've done: training folks, writing that policy, engaging law enforcement, and training folks on how to deal with critical incidences involving mental illness. And thank you.
Cedric Frazier again. I came into office my first term in the midst of COVID and in the midst of watching the video of George Floyd being murdered in broad daylight. I remember sitting on my couch watching the video that morning that I saw it. I had already had the idea of working on police reform and accountability, but it was supercharged, and I knew what the task was when I watched that video. Because I knew that as I was running that campaign and I was headed into office, I was now going to be a part of that conversation to where my voice, bringing the voices of those that voted for me and other community members, was going to be able to be a part of what that accountability reform looked like. One of the major things that I worked on that is now in place in state law is that the board that licenses our local law enforcement now has the ability to investigate cases independently when anyone reports it to them, and then take action when they've determined that that officer has violated their ethics or constitutional rights of individuals. That is real reform put in place that is working right now. And it is, we get the reports, it is working. So now, and local law enforcement tell me this all the time, we're absolutely okay with bad actors being taken out of our ranks because it makes all of our jobs harder. So now we have a state board that is able to take action when they need to remove the license from an officer, therefore taking them out of the community when they're causing harm and violating the Constitution.
Sure, start, yeah.
All right. What is the Hennepin County Attorney's role in helping to hold the federal government and its agents accountable for the human, material, and financial damage done during the ICE operations in our county, past, present, and future?
The Hennepin County Attorney's role is to make sure that we build bridges with our governor, our attorney general, and all other stakeholders so we can do this as one Minnesota. Right now, when we talk about what are we actually doing, in Ramsey County, I have put together a team of specialized prosecutors who are looking into cases actively, and I'm not going to talk about them publicly because I can't, but I'm leading that team. We have called all of our law enforcement chiefs together, including our sheriff, and I've written protocols for them and given them guidelines so they know how to process or investigate a case, and we have backing 100%. So I'm really proud of that work. I'm also wanting to talk about that we don't just go for, there's a whole host of things that the federal government did to us that are felonious conduct: kidnapping, false imprisonment, assault, battery, everything else, not just the shootings and killings. And we got to hold them accountable for that. I got sworn into federal court a month ago because we anticipate that once we prosecute, and if we do, and I will stay here as long as it takes to do that, they're going to remove us to federal court. But they can't throw me out of federal court now because I'm in it. So for me, it is very important that we build those bridges. Again, those bridges, we can't build them when we need them. We have to have them now. So when we called our police chiefs together in Ramsey County and the sheriff, they said, we're with you 100%. So I'm so proud of that. And we'll bring that same experience and work to the Hennepin County Attorney's Office right now.
Anders Folk. So accountability here is going to involve both criminal accountability and civil accountability for the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. And I think, you know, in a normal world, which to be clear, we are not in, we would expect the Department of Justice to be doing civil rights investigations and to be holding these officers accountable for any violations of Minnesotan civil rights. Full stop. That is the practice that we have grown used to, and it is now over. So the question then is, who is going to ensure accountability? And that role is going to fall in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. And I couldn't be more committed to doing that work. And I think on the criminal front, what that means is conducting thorough and impartial investigations, the opposite of what we've heard from the administration about what they're planning to do or not do. And then based on those investigations, make a charging decision. Those cases will go to federal court. They're going to be removed. That's the playbook that'll get run. And then the trick is going to be figure out how to get those cases to survive in federal court. And I think as leaders in the community, we owe it to the community to say this is hard. This is not the normal route. But I also think we need to be very clear-eyed about the fact that accountability demands nothing less than full effort. And I'm committed to that at the county attorney's office on the criminal front. The other piece that we're starting to hear a little bit more about, and I think the civil side of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office can play a role here, is ensuring that to the extent there are money damages that the county has suffered as a result of this federal occupation, that the county is able to seek recovery for that. And so accountability for the criminal action, job one. Job two is the civil recovery.
I would second a lot of what has just been said by Howe and Anders. I would add the following things. One, I think the most difficult decision for the county attorney with respect to prosecuting ICE is going to be management of very limited resources. Every moment spent prosecuting ICE is a moment not spent dealing with the other 15,000 cases that were a problem before ICE showed up, and the system that I think has been a problem for decades. The challenges with successfully prosecuting these cases, I really agree with Anders. It's important for the county attorney to be upfront about those. Doesn't mean you don't necessarily prosecute, but means you recognize that these are very difficult cases because it's getting moved to federal court, because there are issues related to immunity, not absolute immunity, but it's just difficult cases. So prosecuting to the full extent of the law, but also prosecuting smartly so that you continue to say, with our very limited resources, what is the best we can do to keep Hennepin County residents safe? The other thing I'll say is that what we're going to see in the criminal justice system is not just the primary effects of ICE, which we're going to prosecute, but secondary and tertiary effects. And I'll give you a concrete example. We have seen many of our colleagues, our community friends and members, traumatized by ICE actions, continuing to experience that. They may end up in the criminal justice system as defendants for various reasons. The next county attorney is going to have to take that into serious consideration as well. And the final thing I'll say is that much of what ICE has done, of course, has been hurt people physically, in sort of arms and legs and tear gas in the eyes, but a lot of it's mental, and that's real too.
Matt Pelican, I guess I'm the question candidate tonight too. How many people in the room are familiar with Merrick Garland? How many people are really happy with what Merrick Garland did for holding Trump accountable? Yeah. There is real benefit in moving things quickly. You want to get it right. But this is not just a Minnesota issue. ICE blew through here. They're still here. Now they're in Vermont. They're all over the country. Tell you one thing I learned as a gay kid in a small town and being a litigator for 14 years. When a bully punches you, you have to punch back. And so I have a simple question. Where are the charges? This should not be an academic exercise. Many of you raised your hands. You were on the street corners, blowing those whistles, bearing witness. You're telling me there isn't a single use of force case that can be brought to show that there are consequences? I refuse to believe it. Yes, there are resource issues. Keith Ellison brought in special counsel to expand the scope of his office to prosecute the murder of George Floyd. Yes, there are real federal jurisdiction and preemption questions. Courts exist to answer that. As your county attorney, I would show that I'm on your side by pressing for accountability. And maybe the Roberts Court says I'm wrong, but you deserve a county attorney who's demonstrating they're on your side. I said this is a moment for different politicians. This is where you need someone to stand up and show they're unafraid.
No, thank you. These cases are going to, I believe some are likely going to come up in the next several months. Charges are going to be brought. I truly believe that. I'm looking at the work that has been done by the AG and by the current Hennepin County Attorney, the evidence that is being collected. These cases are going to be coming up, but there's going to be many more that are going to fall under the leadership of the next Hennepin County Attorney. So it's going to take persistence, it's going to take courage, and it's going to take commitment to do that. I have committed to that. That is what I have done as a legislator. Some people may tell you that the reason I've been successful is because of my persistence. I don't give up. I don't give up because the last gavel goes down on legislative session. I don't give up because someone tells me you can't do it. I keep pushing because that's important, particularly when the community members have been harmed. It is important that they know they have a fighter and that that person is going to keep fighting for them until we have a conclusion to that. And the conclusion I'm looking for is prosecution and conviction of those individuals that have harmed people and harmed our neighbors in the state of Minnesota. Some of this work I'm doing right now as a legislator, I'm trying to bring more resources to the BCA. They have a use of force unit that is very good, one of the best in the country. I want them to have more investigators to sift through all of the evidence that we're collecting right now. They do a great job of that. I have a great relationship with Superintendent Drew Evans. I will continue that work with them. And I can guarantee you this, regardless of what cases come now or don't come, when I am the leader of that office, we will be focused on that. We will commit the resources that we need, and we will find a way to move forward for accountability.
So regarding management of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, what experiences have you had that would equip you to lead an office of this size? And talk about, because there will be a change in leadership, how will you ensure a orderly transition?
Yeah, so I think this is an office with nearly 500 employees, a budget that's getting closer to $100 million annually every year. So from a leadership perspective, my background includes being the acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Minnesota, a smaller office, but a larger geographic jurisdiction. So we had about 130 employees in that office. About half of those were prosecutors, and half of those were support in various roles. And I think as a leader, and what I've learned in that job, what I learned in the Marine Corps as a Marine Corps officer, is you have to have a clearly set of goals, clearly set expectations, a clear set of goals, and you have to manage to those every day. You have to hold everybody accountable within the office the same way, and you have to ensure that everybody understands what your goals are and how we're going to execute the goals together. Part of that, though, is making yourself as the leader accountable and having the ability to let everybody in that office know you're going to respond positively to their suggestions, and if there's criticism, you want to hear it and you want to make a change to take all of their good ideas into consideration. My experience has been we get much better ideas when we bring a team of leaders together and have a conversation than if I just simply go with what I think is right. And so my experience is be a collaborative leader, be a clear leader, and set goals that everybody can sign off on. And as I mentioned earlier, having a diverse leadership team is critical so that you're considering everything that matters that you might not be thinking.
So when I first started at the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, I was a line attorney trying homicide cases, serious cases, but I was just one of 110 attorneys. I then was promoted to assistant division director, and now I'm the director of our largest trial division as well as our appellate unit. I've done that, and I know I know what people go from the ground up all the way to the top. And actually, I think it's the opposite. When you're the top, you are a mentor, you are a teacher, you are a resource provider. That means the phone is on always. And I don't want to call anybody out, but I have a person here who is a student of mine who now is an attorney in our office. We have one of our only Somali prosecutors in the state who's working with us. And those countless hours of working together, what is evidence? What's an opening statement? How do you do this? How do you do that? And also to correct people when we're running afoul of our values. I know how to fire attorneys. I know how to hire attorneys. I know to have hard conversations with judges when they see our attorneys needing adjustments. I know what it's like to stick up for our attorneys as well when they're doing a great job, but they're facing a judge who might not think so. I know what it takes to make sure that our legal assistants, our paralegals, and everything in between can do the work. For me, I can run a county attorney's office because John Choi has taught me how to do that. And I do that with humility, with service. And so I stand before you as an experienced manager in a county attorney's office with nearly 15 years of prosecution and 20 years of public service.
Thank you. Cedric Frazier, again. I've had the benefit of being around some of the greatest managers in my career. From my time in general counsel's office, Minneapolis Public School, from my time up to my time under the great tutelage, mentorship, and leadership of Speaker Melissa Hortman. What I've learned from those managers is, one, you want to stay connected with your workers, with your staff. You want to be open, accessible, and responsive to them. You want to make sure that you keep, and it's very important, this is a political position. It's an elected political position. You want to make sure you keep the politics away from those workers. You want to create the space to ensure they can do their job thoroughly, with compassion, with ethics, and they know that every single step of the way, I will be there as their leader to protect them from the politics so that doesn't interfere with the work that they're doing. Quick story, last year, when the local attorneys were negotiating their contract, they reached out to me and they said, hey, could you come to our rally and speak on our behalf and support what we're trying to do to make sure we have proper salary, benefits, and a great work environment. I didn't know I was going to run for this office, but of course I said yes, and I showed up. I wrote a letter on their behalf, I put a statement out, I showed up at the rally, and I told them workers make things happen, they make the world go round, and it's important that they have the support of their leader, and they will have that support with me.
Matt Pelican. The Hennepin County Attorney's Office is the largest law firm in the state. So on one hand, there isn't going to be someone running or applying for that job who has the identical experience. I've managed large systems in my life. In 2016, I said Donald Trump is a threat to this country. I quit my job and went to Ohio, where I managed voter protection for Hillary Clinton's campaign in the general election. I oversaw a system of over 300 lawyers deployed to polling places throughout Ohio, thousands of volunteers to ensure that there was a fair vote that year in that state. I was editor-in-chief of the Law Review. My successor in that was Chris Schmitter, who went on to be very successfully the governor's chief of staff, with great experience besides that as well. I've been in Florida running multi-tiered campaign operations. I have experience in management, but I think this is also a question of values. And that's one reason I started with this. This is not an ordinary moment. So experience should not only be measured in running that office, it should be measured in setting the priorities and the character. And that is where I have spent my life, and I'm most proud of when the chips matter, I stand up for people. And that is experience that I have really built my life around.
Francis Shen, University of Minnesota. I've come to this managing in a different way. I've had hundreds of students that I've hired and staff on the projects that I run, and tens of millions of dollars in grant projects. To me, the question is really, how do you manage for innovation change? It's the most difficult thing to do, and here's the reason. When any corporation or firm, which is the largest law firm, trains new folks, you ask, hey, I'm the new person, how do you do this? And the person who's been there a while said, here's how we do it. Well, how did that person learn? When they were hired, somebody said, here's how we do it. What I ask my students is, and one part I'm there to teach them how the law works today, but how will the law change? How does the law change? I think that's the most difficult thing. And here's what I've learned, because everything that I do didn't exist before. First executive director of something called the Center for Law, Brain, and Behavior. I was hired here at the University of Minnesota to create a field that didn't exist. And so I am trying to do something and bring ideas here that there's so much evidence, but we would be the first, we'd be the national leader. And here's the secret: new energy and new blood. And the most exciting thing I think about the campaign, I just asked somebody, are you enjoying the campaign? I love it because I'm looking at our team right there. They're now delegates, they're young, people are coming out, they see the value in these ideas. We're gonna fill that office with folks who are hungry for change. We're gonna partner with the experienced folks who are there, gonna navigate that, and we can do some really big things. But that's the key, is finding early successes, showing that the ideas are not just ideas, they're proven evidence, they work, and that's how culture changes. That's how the law can change.
Do you want to have, Francis, do you want to just go ahead and start? Great.
Keep the
Okay,
mic.
next question. All right. One of the main ways the Hennepin County Attorney can get crosswise with the community is in regards to a charging decision. What is your charging philosophy?
Fantastic question. 97% of those 10 to 15,000 cases are done by plea deal. So forget the idea that most of these cases are being resolved between a jury making the decision. It's all about the charging decision and then the ensuing back and forth that happens with the plea deal. And I can tell you one thing that we're not going to do is we're not going to play games. Some prosecutor's office in this negotiation back and forth, they come in high or they hold all these charges over someone and they do something that's called the prosecution penalty. And it goes like this. Well, you don't have to take the deal, but if we go to trial, I can't make you any promises. You know what we found? The evidence has found that that forces people to admit to doing things they didn't do. We're not going to play games. We're going to come in it straight. We're going to look at the evidence. We're going to say, here's what we can charge beyond a reasonable doubt on each of these elements. And then crucially, we're going to try and figure out what sentencing options based on those charges. This is where you have all the flexibility. This is the power of the office, is the discretion in charging. Is how do we make those charges so that the ultimate outcome, which is going to be a plea deal in 97% of the cases, makes Hennepin County safer. That is the bottom line. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we contact victims and ask them, one, if they're involved, and two, simple question, scale of 1 to 5. How do you feel about the outcome of this case? That gives us a metric of victim empowerment that this office doesn't have. It's a fantastic way to make sure that victims are part of this process.
I think I might be the only person on the stage who both supported Mary Moriarty for county attorney and is willing to publicly criticize her now. That's unique and it's important, and I say it in response to this because I believe in reforming the system, and I believe it's urgent to continue to have a more fair system and a more just system. But I think there have been some very serious missteps, and one of them touches on this. They put in a written policy that they would take race into account when making charging decisions. I think that's unacceptable. I think addressing disparity matters, and it happens through the policing reforms we've been talking about. It happens through addressing the law, but I already touched on it. Everyone is equal under the law, and I believe trust and confidence in the system are so essential that people need to understand that the laws will be equally enforced. The president should be equal under the law, and the people who violate the laws in Hennepin County and harm our community should be equal under the law, and that's my fundamental charging philosophy.
Thank you, Cedric Frazier. This question really takes me back to kind of one of the things that we hit on earlier. How do we make sure we build a system that people can trust? Part of that is if someone is interacting with coming into this system and we're making charging decisions, as someone mentioned before, it shouldn't be come in as high as you can, charge with every single thing you can. with the opportunity, with the thought that you're going to pressure them into potentially pleading to something that they did not do. That doesn't build trust. That makes us less safe, because that means people are less likely to call or participate within the process that we need to do when we do have to prosecute individuals to make our community safer. I will be laser focused on how we clean those things up. That's very important. It doesn't mean that we're going to do things to make our communities less safe. It just means we're going to look at this from a lens of humanity. And it is true, historically, we have had some very great disparities within this system. That doesn't mean that we can't move forward and do things in a way where we can keep our community safe. One, by doing charging decisions in a way that is upfront, that is transparent, and based on the evidence that we have, not anything that is going to be piled on to get convictions. What my staff attorneys will know is that we will not reward you just for the mere fact of getting convictions. We will reward you for doing this job in an ethical, in a thorough way, in a way driven by your values.
One of the things I'm most proud about when we talk about charging philosophy is I've led a team that we've transformed what we think about sex case worker jobs. So what we've learned is we shouldn't just prosecute women who are being abused, sex trafficked, and told to go and then earn money. We were doing that before, and that's not appropriate. And in Ramsey County, we're focusing on the Johns. We're focusing on the people who abuse, extort, and traffic women. And that we got law enforcement behind with us, and we made women more safe, and we stopped the flow of that. And I'm really proud of that. I also lead a team called the Start by Believing Sexual Assault Team. That's a team where we listen and we believe. Mostly those victims are women, mostly women, men too, but we believe them when they tell us they've been sexually abused, raped, hurt, and all those things. Again, I've got a fifth grader out there, so I'll be quiet. But we will prosecute the hard cases to Start by Believing. I'm proud of that work, and our stats show the productivity in Ramsey County. I'll bring that to Hennepin. Also, we talk about the prosecution of the addiction, prosecuting addiction, violations of fifth degree, low-level felony drug abuse. We don't do that in Ramsey County because we don't prosecute addiction. We're trying to find places for people to live. We're trying to treat the addiction, and that makes people more safe. So when we talk about all those things, I have been doing those things, and I'm proud to bring them to Hennepin County as well.
Anders Folk, a charging decision has to reflect holding somebody accountable for what it is they've done. And the key component of that is making sure that if you have 3 different people who all did the same thing, they're going to be treated the same way. They're not going to be charged differently based on who they are, where they're from, whether they have one lawyer or another lawyer. And so we have to make sure that our charging decisions are made fairly, impartially, and consistently. You heard the word transparency. It's critical. Transparency has to exist within the county attorney's office itself so that prosecutors all know what the expectation and guidelines are. But more importantly, it has to be outward facing so that the community understands what they can expect. And then what has to happen, if for whatever reason you're not following your normal practice, you as the county attorney, you as the leader need to step up and step out and explain the why. The why is critical to ensuring that the community understands why you are making a different decision in a particular case. And you heard from Professor Shen, and he's exactly right. So many of these cases are resolved and we never hear anything about them. But when these cases are high profile and when they grab the public's attention, that is when it is most critical that the why is part of the conversation from the county attorney. And the last piece I just want to tell you with the charging decision, we owe it as prosecutors to the victims' families, and the victim communities to understand the why behind the charging decision. And I spent my career as a prosecutor doing that at the federal level. It's critical to building and maintaining trust.
Let's let Matt answer the last question first. So we've made it to the last question, number 8. You can start, just send it down the line. How do you assess the effectiveness of youth diversion programs, and what are your plans for ongoing youth diversion programs? What will your approach be on youth offenders, prosecution or prevention?
Yeah, well, and those are distinct. I think youth diversion is really important. And I think that it's one of the ways that we can try to get ahead of really serious crime. And I think that, you know, the key is that people have confidence and they can see a transparent system. I talk about this going upstream and downstream. And I think, you know, we're talking about charging decisions and charging philosophy. When a crime has been committed and it comes to your desk, you have limited number of decisions, but you can also work to go downstream from there to make sure that the process is going to be fair and is going to rehabilitate the person. So youth both have a very high recidivism rate, but they also benefit from a lot of programming that will help them fully develop as adults in society. And that's one reason why the recidivism rates are so high. So it's really important that once they enter that system, we are supporting them to get on a pathway to be full, equal members of society when they come out of the system, and we're not just feeding them into a pipeline. And that's essential. So I would judge by the rate of recidivism and the rate of crime among youth. And it's a real issue here, I mean, with the carjackings and all that. So you have to get in front of it. And that's one of the things that the county attorney really has to do. And that's one reason I talk about someone who's really mindful of continuing to reform the system, while being fair and just in how you do it.
I love this question because this has been a large part of our work for the last 15 years. The world of neuroscience and law collide in a lot of places, but none more importantly at the intersection of youth and young adult justice. In 2005, in a case called Roper, it was only then that the U.S. Supreme Court decided it was unconstitutional on the 8th Amendment not to allow the death penalty for 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds. And they made that decision based on scientific evidence for two reasons. One, youth can still change, and two, they're not as culpable. Now, that's at the group level. So the answer is individualized justice, and we are doing this in real time. A program that we've co-created with our Suffolk County partners in Boston. We're bringing here, it's an emerging adult program. When you turn 18, 17 years, 364 days, 24 hours, 59 seconds, and that clock ticks, you're suddenly considered adult in the eyes of the law. Not so with the behavioral and neuroscience. What do? We do individualized assessment, including looking for adverse childhood experiences. We then develop a diversion program, and we've got outcomes that work. So how do you measure the outcomes? You look at the trajectory of these young people as they move forward. Incarceration is one of the absolute worst and dumbest things you can do for the trajectory of a young person. The evidence is abundantly clear. We can do better. It's not academic. We are actually doing it. So we'd expand those programs. We work at the individualized level to understand the why, and then you can understand the how to change it. We can collaborate, and Hennepin County can become the national leader. Why? Because we have such a robust network of community partners. Wish we could say more, but leave it at that. It would be a high area of focus for our administration.
Thank you. Anders Folk, you know, for starters, if I'm fortunate enough to get elected as Hennepin County Attorney, I would want to rely on outside experts, and I don't know that there's anybody more of an outside expert than Professor Shen, candidly. And I think the trick to juvenile justice is striking the balance between the right amount of compassion for juveniles and ensuring a consequence that's sufficient to ensure public safety. And I think some of the things we traditionally have relied on that I think require ongoing building out and investment from the county attorney's office perspective are our diversion programs, our restorative justice programs, things like youth GVI, group violence intervention model. These are critical kind of components of any, I think, appropriate justice system for handling youth. Certainly there are going to be the horrific cases, whether it's Zaria McKeever being murdered by juveniles in a premeditated homicide, that kind of breaks outside of some of these efforts to use restorative justice, diversion, et cetera. But I think we all need to have a commitment to do everything we can to keep kids with their families and at home and productive members of our community. All that said, I think we need a third option. Right now, we tend to adjudicate kids and oftentimes send them to a juvenile detention center or to a Red Wing facility. Let's bring back another option. We used to have a county homeschool. We need to do better for kids who are justice involved and give them options and give them education and give them an opportunity to break the cycle that's gotten them into the justice system to begin with.
I will say the McKeever case, and it'll be really quick. That was a planned, executed killing, and there are just some things that we need to hold account for. There just are. Part of the prosecution job is making sure we hold folks accountable when they take a life. But everything else, we should really be thoughtful and think about, because all these kids are our kids. I was one of these kids who grew up on EBT, food stamps, lived in a trailer park. I was a truant kid. The sheriff came to my house. There's lots of things that by the grace of God, I'm here today. But in Ramsey County, I'm really proud that we have this program called the CRT program. And it's a hard program. We bring on the public defender before charging. We bring on community before charging. We bring on support services, and we all sit around, and we also bring on the victim and the child who's alleged to commit the harm. And we have a circle, and we talk about what is the best choice moving forward. Because most victims, their voices need to be uplifted, but they also, many of them that I've talked to, want healing for both the parties. And we do that right now in Ramsey County, and I'm really proud of the work that we do. And I know that we can do it in Hennepin County. And I would be happy to bring that experience and lead that work in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. Thank you.
I'll just, Cedric Frazier. So I grew up on the south side of Chicago in a community called Inglewood. Statistically, I'm not supposed to be sitting in this seat right now having this conversation with you all. I was never supposed to go to college, never supposed to go to grad school, I was never supposed to go to law school, never supposed to be elected a city council member, state representative, I was never supposed to be a state representative, right? What I would focus on, and I know this from lived experiences, what are the things that we need in our communities to ensure that young people have the opportunity to be on a path where they can reach their full potential in the most positive way? As society, we know what causes crime. We know the determinants that will push someone to a life of crime. We have failed because we know that. We know that, and we have failed to provide the prerequisite things that we need to put in place to ensure that that doesn't happen. Someone mentioned the Hennepin County Homeschool. When we remove places, because sometimes young people need to be taken out of terrible situations. It will protect them, and it will protect those around them. But when we remove the resources that we had in place for that, we have done a disservice to our young people, and we have done a disservice to the community as a whole. I will be focusing on how to invest in those tools and resources. I will be using my relationships at the state legislature, my connections with the Hennepin County commissioners, and also local elected officials as well that make budget decisions to make sure we're investing in a system that works for our young people. Accountability when it's necessary, but prevention and intervention all the time to make sure they have what they need.
Thank you. Okay, so we are at the end, almost the end of our program. So now we're going to ask each of you to end with a closing statement. You'll have 2 minutes. And before you end your statement, please answer this question. Will you abide by the DFL endorsement? Take it away.
I believe in the DFL process. DFL are through and through. Won 3 elections, about 60% running as a DFLer, always had the endorsement. I think it's a great process. I think it gives people the opportunity to participate in this, and I plan to abide by this endorsement process. Just in closing, again, I am running because I don't want to see us go backwards. And I do have a real fear of that. And the thing I think about the most, and I mentioned this earlier, I think about the time in 2020 when the cities were burning. And that was because there was a huge historical lack of trust in the office that is there to provide accountability when someone has harmed someone in the community. I am running because I believe I've always been a leader that has ensured that everyone is going to be treated fairly, everyone is going to be seen for their humanity that they have, and that no one is going to be above the law and no one is going to be beneath the protections of the law either. I carry those things with me because of my lived experiences, because I grew up in a place where systems that were designed to help did not help and protect everyone. And I've spent my life with every opportunity that I've had and any space that I've had the opportunity to be in, trying to make sure that others don't have to experience that. I will continue with that charge. I will do it with integrity, with ethics, and compassion, and empathy, because that's all I know. And that is a promise that I bring to you when I'll be the leader of this office. I will be out in the community. I will be there arm in arm, and I will make sure that I'm carrying the voices of the community into every decision that is made and how the office is run. It's the only way I know I do the work.
And yes, I will abide by the DFL endorsement. I'm a progressive, I'm a Democrat. America's progressive values brought my family here. By the grace of God, I've been able to sit here before you, and I have a tremendous heart and want to give back to a country that's given me so much, to the state, I believe the best state in the union. For me, I'm running because I am the most experienced county attorney candidate at the trial level, district court level. I know what it's like to do the work from the beginning till the end, from the law enforcement squad car all the way through sentencing. I know what it's like to hold victims' hands and bring them into the courtroom and look at the accuser and talk to a jury. I also know the empathy that is required to look at the defendant when they're going away for several years of their life. It is a very difficult job, and it is one that requires experience. For me, I am stepping up to serve because everything that has been poured into me, the intersection of poverty, the intersection of the refugee experience. It is not easy to stand up right now as a refugee, as a father of a trans child, as a progressive prosecutor, as a person who lives in this city, to say, I'm here to serve, and actually I know how to do it. So I'm here because I know our community right now needs a person who knows how to do the work, and I'm asking for your help and support to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Anders Folk. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I want to thank the DFL Caucus again, and frankly, I want to thank the candidates who are up here. I've been taking a bunch of notes, and I feel like I've learned a lot and gotten some really good ideas. This has been a really meaningful experience. I'm committed to seeking the DFL endorsement. I'm having a lot of fun doing it, meeting a lot of great people. I think the voters of Hennepin County deserve to hear from as many of us in the primary as possible, and I intend to fight at the primary as well. I think it would be a shame. We have one candidate in the race who's not here tonight. And if everybody up here were to abide and that person made it through the primary, I think that would be a shame for the DFL. And so I'm committed to continue fighting for our DFL values. I want to tell you a couple things. I've spent my entire career doing criminal justice work as a Marine Corps prosecutor, as a law clerk at the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, as a federal prosecutor leading the U.S. Attorney's Office. I've tried dozens of cases to jury. I've investigated hundreds of cases, and I've stood with defendants who have nothing and are waiting judgment from a judge. That experience is incredibly powerful to be on both sides of the aisle. And I think that anybody leading a county attorney's office should understand the impact that their decisions have on real people. I think a good county attorney must have a firm commitment to the rule of law, whether you're a violent offender, a fraudster, or an ICE agent. Everybody needs to be held accountable, and I'm committed to that every day of the week. Protecting the most vulnerable in our community is job one for any prosecutor. Lifting up the voices of those who don't have one is job one for every prosecutor. And any good prosecutor will tell you that there's nothing harder than sitting down with those who have the least and telling them that you're going to stand next to them and get them justice, because you're putting a lot on you. That's the job of the county attorney, to embolden and to motivate that entire office to do that justice every day. This office plays a critical role in making Hennepin County safe for everybody. And if you want an experienced, compassionate leader who's a collaborator by nature, I'd be honored to have your support.
Francis Shen, I want to echo what everyone has said. I want to thank the DFL Senior Caucus. I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank all of my fellow candidates. It's been a really great experience running and made better because of the high quality of candidates. You know, I've listened to Andrew's experience, and in many ways, I wish we could almost merge and take the best of many of these candidates because experience is important. But again, I'll come back to where I started. How do you innovate? And how do you take the awesome knowledge that's being generated at places like the University of Minnesota and bring meaningfully and ethically into the justice system? That's why I'm running. I think the criminal justice system isn't just broken, it's obsolete. I think many of the outcomes that we see in the system are actually the way the system works. When you have 10 to 15,000 cases a year, what becomes the hallmark is administrative efficiency, not justice. Like I said, we gave up on jury trials a long time ago. 97% of these cases are plea deals, and those plea deals are so often done in the shadow of sentencing guidelines that are far removed from the realities of the individuals in the system. We fail the defendants, we fail the victims. We can do better. And it's not just, oh, I've got this idea. No, there are proven effective solutions to do better. I'll give you one concrete example to leave. Some people drive drunk on a Tuesday night because they just made a dumb decision. Others have an addiction. You know what we do? We treat all first-time DUIs the same, except there's a diversion program in here. It's called All Rise here and in Duluth that says, you know, with a 15-minute validated screen, we could start to separate the 1/3, those with the addiction, from the 2/3, those who just made a dumb decision, and then we could respond very differently. That saves lives, that improves justice, and that can be done not just at the DUI level, but for so many areas, and it's being done, just not being done enough. So we are 25 years into the 21st century. Our criminal justice system needs to innovate. That's why I'm running. I want to thank again you for being here, and I hope you ask all the candidates how they're going to innovate. Oh, yes, and I will abide by the DFL endorsement. I got so excited about innovation.
Thank you.
Innovation is exciting. Matt Pelican. I grew up in Northfield, as I mentioned. I went to my first precinct caucus when I was 16 years old. I was precinct chair in Northfield before I could vote. I was chair of the St. Olaf College Dems, where I got to know Paul Wellstone and his team and worked for Paul. Moved around the country, working for Democrats, including here in Minnesota, Mark Dayton, Mike Cerisi, and others. I've spent my life standing up and trying to make a difference. I was a litigator for 14 years, as I mentioned. I'm proud of what I did. I went to the state Supreme Court and changed the law to extend protections under the Minnesota Human Rights Act to unpaid interns. I went back to the Supreme Court to make sure that one of the leading attorneys in town who was abusing his own employees faced the maximum consequence. He was a friend of mine. On January 14th of this year, I found out that my law firm of 9 years was representing Jonathan Ross, the agent who shot Renee Good. And on January 15th, I quit. It's because I've spent my life devoting my time to being on your side and the side of people in Minnesota. It's one reason why in 2018, I ran for Attorney General against a 12-year Democratic incumbent when no one else in the state was willing to do it. And I was honored to earn the DFL endorsement and be a candidate in that race. I started by talking about how this is not an ordinary moment. Everyone on the stage has good experience and great experience, but we should be asking ourselves, who has the experience to lead in this moment? We cannot go back to the system that brought us the murder of George Floyd and the broken trust after that. There isn't a code of conduct for prosecutors on the shelf we can go back to. We have to keep moving forward, but we have to do it in a way that makes Hennepin County a livable, thriving city. I have put my life into this work, and I will make you proud and earn this moment as your Hennepin County attorney, and absolutely, I will abide by the DFL endorsement.
A very well-deserved round of applause. Thank you to the candidates for being here tonight. I hope that this evening has been illuminating for the folks here in the audience, in the auditorium, as well as folks joining us online, or those who may be watching this in the future as this recorded Zoom will be posted and be available online through the election. I think the candidates did a great job this evening of illuminating the issues before this office, the issues in this race, and issues for voters to consider, both the things that you demonstrated in common as well as those that differentiate each of your campaigns. Thank you again to the candidates for their commitment, their courage, and their engagement. We have invited the candidates to stick around here in the auditorium, maybe out in the hall, wherever they're comfortable for a little while, and answer your individual questions. Feel free to engage them, but please also be aware that the clock is ticking. We have to be out of here by 9 o'clock, and we want to respect our hosts here at Sabathany. I also want to invite everyone, candidates included as everyone, to join chapter leaders and event volunteers for a little informal at Pat's Tap at 3510 Nicollet after the event is over for a chance to decompress, swap stories, share insights, and enjoy the evening. With that, again, thank you to the candidates. Thank you to Diane and Kara and the event volunteers. Thank you all for being here. Good night.